These pressures on supply and demand have driven gas prices up by roughly 50% so far this year. European countries heavily reliant on Russian gas are navigating a complex energy landscape as U.S. sanctions on Gazprom Bank take effect on December 20, 2024. These sanctions have created significant challenges for nations like Slovakia, Hungary, and Austria, which rely on long-term contracts with Gazprom.
We will not continue the transit of Russian gas. We will not give them the opportunity to earn additional billions on our blood. Any country in the world that could receive something cheap from Russia, in the end, tomorrow, in a month, in a year, will become dependent on the Russian Federation. This is their policy. That's why we won't transit Russian gas anymore.
They announced that there won't be a contract, they won't extend it. Then they realized that it's a problem for them. They started to panic. How did this panic manifest? They started reaching out to everyone, essentially asking someone other than Naftogaz of Ukraine to sign a contract for transit through Ukraine's territory, so that the gas would be managed by Gazprom up to the border. And then, within Ukraine, under someone else's control, say Hungary, Slovakia, Turkey, or Azerbaijan, to sign a contract for transit through Ukraine's territory, and at the border with Europe, Gazprom and its partners would handle it. The problem is that Gazprom has long-term contracts, lasting until 2035, until 2049. In order to change the situation regarding transit, these contracts would have to be broken. Very complicated procedure, very hard to resolve, if not impossible. And there's another thing.
A cold front is expected to sweep through nations such as Germany and France, significantly increasing the need for heating. Europe's gas reserves have been shrinking at a rapid rate in recent months due to increased consumption during colder weather. At the same time, low wind activity has reduced renewable energy output, forcing greater reliance on gas for electricity production.
All right, let's jump right in and explore this whole energy situation in Europe. It's, well, it's a bit of a mess, isn't it? We're talking about the end of that Russia-Ukraine gas deal, and it feels like the whole energy map is getting redrawn right in front of us.
Oh, absolutely. It's a real powder keg.
Yeah.
And yeah, the stakes, they couldn't be higher. Not just for Europe. This is a global thing.
It is. So to get everyone on the same page, Russia's been the big energy guy for Europe, right?
Yeah.
Like for decades. And a lot of that gas was flowing through, you guessed it, Ukraine, pipelines right through the country. But that agreement, PFT, gone, expired at the end of 2024. And Ukraine said, nope, not renewing it.
Yeah, it's a huge change. You know, even before the war started, people were saying, hey, EU, maybe don't rely so much on Russia for your energy. Especially, I mean, remember when they took Crimea back in 2014? That was a big wake-up call. But I gotta say, Ukraine's move to completely stop the transit, that's a whole new ballgame.
Yeah, and you can't really separate this from the whole conflict with Russia, can you? I mean, for Ukraine, cutting off that gas is a way to hit them where it hurts,
Right.
in the wallet. Zelensky's been so clear about that. No deals that help Russia, even if it means things get tougher in Ukraine.
Oh, it's a bold move, no doubt. Shows how strong Ukraine is, how determined they are. But, and there's always a but, it's also risky. I mean, things could get even worse with Russia. And what about those European countries that were counting on that gas? That's going to put a strain on things.
And that's where Slovakia comes in. Stuck right in the middle. They really need that Russian gas, but they were making good money off those transit fees too.
Yeah, you're right. And their prime minister, Fico, he hasn't exactly been quiet about it. He's been, well, let's just say he's been criticizing Ukraine pretty openly. He's worried, seriously worried about what happens to Slovakia and the EU as a whole if that gas stops flowing.
He's not just talking though, right? Didn't he actually threaten to like cut off electricity to Ukraine if they don't turn the gas back on? That's getting pretty serious.
It is. And it just shows you the impossible choices some of these European leaders are facing. It's like, how do you support Ukraine, but also look out for your own people? Tough spot. No easy answers there.
And then, just to make things even more complicated, Ukraine throws another curveball. They threaten to stop Russian oil from going through the Druzhba pipeline. And guess where that pipeline runs through? Yep, Slovakia. What a tangled web we've woven.
It really shows how everything's connected when it comes to energy in that part of the world. One country makes a move and everyone feels it.
So let's zoom out a little. Big picture time. What does this gas shutdown actually mean for Europe? Well, in a nutshell, it's a mess. Energy prices going through the roof, worries about not having enough, especially with winter coming, and everyone scrambling to find other ways to keep the lights on.
Yeah, and it just lays bare how vulnerable Europe's energy setup really is. The International Energy Agency, they said that before the war, almost 40% of the EU's natural gas was coming from Russia. Just try to imagine if 40% of the energy you use at home just, poof, vanished overnight. That's the scale of the problem they're facing.
And FICA's talking some pretty big numbers too, right? Saying that European households could be paying an extra, what was it, 40 to 50 billion euros a year just for gas, and then tack on another 60 to 70 billion for electricity. Yikes.
And those are just the immediate hits. Long term, it could be rough. Real economic trouble, maybe going back to using coal, and even countries within the EU fighting with each other over energy. Not a pretty picture.
There's been talk about getting more liquefied natural gas from the US, but that stuff's expensive, and it's not exactly a fix forever, is it?
Nope. It really highlights how urgent it is for the EU to get serious about renewables, using less energy overall, and getting more bang for their buck with the energy they do use. This whole situation is like a giant flashing sign saying, sustainable energy future needed, ASAP.
It's a wake-up call for the whole continent, that's for sure. The big question is, how are they going to answer it? Are they going to come together, find a new way forward, or will this whole thing just make them even more dependent on, well, another big power? Because believe it or not, this is where the U.S. comes into the story.
Yeah, talk about a twist, right? I mean, when Trump was president, he was all over the EU to buy American oil and gas, even threatened tariffs. It's almost like he was trying to make things even more chaotic.
It is kind of ironic, though, right? They're breaking up with Russia, trying to be more independent, and now they might just end up leaning on the U.S. instead.
It definitely raises some big questions about where Europe goes from here, energy-wise. Can they actually carve out their own path? Or is it just going to be trading one dependency for another?
And for everyday folks in Europe, I mean, this Bloomberg report we've got is not exactly painting a rosy picture.
No, not at all. Energy prices, they're going to be all over the place for a while. And that affects everything, from how much you pay to heat your home to how much that loaf of bread costs at the store. And we can't forget about the potential for shortages, especially when it gets really cold.
The Guardian had this story about a family in Germany. They're really struggling to afford to keep their house warm. It's a good reminder that this isn't just numbers on a spreadsheet. It's real people's lives.
Exactly. And it's actually a situation where what we do individually can make a difference. We all need to think about how much energy we're using, and start figuring out ways to use less, especially fossil fuels. It's not just talk anymore, this whole renewable energy and energy efficiency thing. It's got to be what we do.
But it can't just be on individuals, right? The EU needs to step up too and do it together. What are some of the things you think they really need to focus on?
Well, first things first. They got to find a way to get energy from somewhere else, at least for now. Might mean buying more of that liquefied natural gas from other countries, even if it costs more. But looking ahead, they've got to go all in on renewable energy.
That's a big change, though. Can they really pull it off?
It's a huge challenge, no question, but I think it can be done. They've already set these goals to cut their carbon emissions, big goals, and this whole crisis, maybe that's the push they need to actually make it happen. The International Energy Agency, they've actually got this whole plan laid out how to reach those goals. It involves changing policies, new tech, and getting businesses to invest.
But what about the EU itself? I mean, we've already seen countries like Slovakia pushing back on some of the ideas out there. Can they really get everyone on the same page and work together?
That's the key right there. They have to be united, especially now. If everyone tries to go it alone, it's not going to work as well, and it might even weaken Europe as a whole.
So let's switch gears for a second and talk about Russia. What do you think they're thinking with all this? Are they actually trying to use energy as a weapon to mess things up in Europe?
It's hard to know for sure what's going on in Putin's head, but it's definitely a possibility. I mean, Russia has this long history of using energy to get what they want in politics, and this crisis, yeah, it gives them some leverage, a way to try and influence Europe.
But that could backfire on them, right? I mean, the more they push Europe away, the more Europe's going to look for other places to get their energy from and move away from fossil fuels faster.
Yeah.
In the end, that's got to hurt Russia's position in the global energy market.
Yeah, you're right. It's a risky game they're playing. They're basically betting that Europe needs them so badly they'll cave in. But if Europe manages to break free to find other energy sources, well, then Russia loses its grip.
And what about Ukraine? They took a big stand by shutting off that gas pipeline. But are they also putting themselves in danger, getting caught in the middle of this power struggle?
Yeah, that's a real worry. They're walking a tightrope, you know? They want to be independent from Russia, but they still need the EU's support. It's a tough balancing act.
And could all this spill over create energy problems in other parts of the world too? Could we see more standoffs like this happening elsewhere?
Oh, it's definitely possible. This whole situation, it shows how important energy security is for everyone. And when there are problems in one part of the world, everybody feels it.
So, taking a really big picture view, what does this mean for energy in the long run, for the whole world? Do you think this might actually speed up the shift to renewable energy globally?
I think it has the potential to do that. This crisis in Europe, it's a wake-up call for the entire planet. It shows how dangerous it is to depend on fossil fuels and how urgent it is to switch to energy sources that are more sustainable and secure.
It feels like we're at a crossroads. What we do now, the choices we make, they're going to shape what energy looks like for years to come. It's a little scary, but it's also a chance to build a better energy future, one that's cleaner and fairer.
Yeah, it definitely feels like things are shifting. This whole thing's really shown us just how fragile our energy systems are, you know? Like, we need a whole new way of thinking about energy, how we get it, how we use it.
So for people like me, trying to wrap our heads around all this,
Mhm.
what should we be paying attention to? Like, as this story keeps unfolding, what are the key things to watch for?
Well, I think it all comes down to how Europe's leaders react to these immediate problems. I mean, are they going to go for those quick fixes, or are they going to really try to make Europe energy independent in the long run? What they do now, it's going to have a huge impact, not just on their economies, but on Europe's political stability, even the relationships with other countries.
Speaking of relationships, that whole thing between the EU and Russia and the EU and the US, that's going to be interesting to watch, isn't it? Can they handle all that, all those geopolitical tensions without ending up too reliant on one or the other?
Yeah, it's a tough spot for the EU. They got to get away from depending on Russia, but they also don't want to end up just as dependent on American gas, right? That wouldn't really solve anything. It's a tricky balance for sure. And then there's the whole renewable energy thing. Will this crisis actually speed up the switch to renewables? Or will it end up being a step backward, with countries going back to old ways just to keep the lights on?
That's a really important point. There's a real danger that this immediate need for energy could push some countries back towards fossil fuels like coal. But I'm really hoping that this whole situation will be like I don't know, a jumpstart for renewables. The technology's there, more and more people seem to want it, and it's making more and more economic sense every day.
It sounds like this could be a real turning point, not just for Europe, but for everyone.
I think so too.
Yeah.
The whole world's watching what happens in Europe right now.
Yeah.
If they can get through this and come out with an energy system that's actually sustainable and strong, well, that could be an example for everyone else facing the same kind of problems. It's a reminder that even when things are tough, even in a crisis, there are still opportunities. Maybe this whole situation will kickstart a real energy revolution, you know, one that takes us to a cleaner, more sustainable energy future, one that's fairer for everyone.
And it shows that we all have a part to play in this transition, whether it's changing things in our own lives to use less energy, supporting policies that help renewable energy grow, or even just staying informed and involved in this issue. Everything we do matters.
Well said. I think that's a great place to wrap things up. We've covered a lot today, trying to understand this European energy crisis from all sides. It's a big deal, with no easy answers and a lot of uncertainty. But it also shows how connected we all are, the challenges we're all facing, and the chances we have to make things better.
It's a story that's still being written, you know, and we don't know how it's going to end. But one thing's for sure, the choices we make now, they're going to have a huge impact on the future of energy, not just for Europe, but for the whole world.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope this has helped you understand this complicated situation a little better and maybe even inspired you to learn more about it. Stay curious, stay informed, and stay involved. We'll be back soon with another deep dive into something that matters.